turnkey. But that one absolutely kills it. Like again, 250,000 for about 900 square foot, 850 square foot, but it brings in, I mean, it grossed 83,000 last year and it netted about 45,000.
Really?
So
Okay.
again, that's a small little example.
Yep.
But that's, I mean, you can just scale that. And when I say like 650 cabins, my goal, like I am looking into developing like boutique hotels in metro cities as well. Some of these like smaller 20 to 40 unit like boutique hotels that are unique in some way as well.
Okay. This is one of the things I've always struggled with because um I'm more like my mindset is the long-term rental, right? But I've
Yeah.
got a 10 unit townhouse project that I just completed. Literally, we're turning over keys tomorrow and on Thursday, right? And depending on when you're listening to this, basically the end of August, beginning of September 2022. And we actually were approached by a lady who does short-term rentals, Airbnb, something to that effect. I presume that's kind of in the similar
Yes, absolutely.
space. And she wanted to essentially head lease or basically lease from us the
Yes.
whole thing.
And then
And then she would just take the spread, whatever she's able to lease it out for. And so um, my concern is that short-term renters are going to be harder on my property, and that might and maybe I'm wrong, right? I don't know this, but I want to get someone that's in the space that doesn't like um uh you're not going to tell me what I want to hear. You're going to give me the straight goods, right? So like
yeah,
is that
absolutely.
is that a reality? Like there's more wear and tear, more upkeep, um more I don't know, more people coming in partying, or what's the maybe that's just false assumptions I have. So I like I said, I really don't
Yeah.
understand the space.
Yeah, because when you hear short-term rentals, like the first thing people think about is parties, like especially when it comes to like cities and stuff. It's like boom, like that's the first thing. I would actually say it's the opposite to more wear and tear. And the reason I would say that is because, and I like with the students that I coach, like this is one thing that does come up,
Mm-hmm.
is I always like to tell them because some of the students do that, the rental arbitrage model of like going out and subleasing essentially properties. And I always tell them to tell the landlords or tell the owner of the property that if a get say like your average stay is 3 days, right? Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
2 to 3 days, 2 to 4 days, a cleaning company is coming through your property 2 to 3 times a week to clean it. A long-term renter isn't going to be doing that.
Yeah, good point.
So that's one of the things that I say, like when the wear and tear question comes up is like the property is taken care of better than if someone is actually living there long term, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so on that, maybe on that, like how do you choose locations? Because I never would have anticipated, like we're close to downtown, we're close to transit, but I didn't envision that this would be a short-term rental. Like how do you decide? I'm sure that experience and whatnot, but just
Yeah.
at a very high level, how do you start to make those choices?
Yeah, so I mean, before we even like choose market, I like to choose floor plans first, and then
Sure.
we can work the
Okay.
foundation around the lay of the land because I live in the mountains, so like foundation plans can be completely different parcel to parcel.
Yeah.
But so we like to do some sort of unique property, whether it be an A-frame, modern contemporary property. Log cabins do very well in any type of wooded anything. But when it comes to market, there's some really good tools out there that you can look into. AirDNA.co is one of them. You have to pay for it, but you can see how many properties are in a specific market. But they pull all their information from Airbnb, VRBO, and they'll show you how much a property is making and everything like to sort of get an idea. But I like to invest in scenic markets, markets that have some sort of scenic outdoor type of feel to them. And
Mm-hmm.
what I've realized is like, especially mountain markets are a little bit less seasonal than if you're investing in a lake or if you're investing in like an ocean like type of market,
Right.
beach market.
Yeah.
I love the mountain market because, and it's two parts. It's you're building a unique property and then a scenic market. And the reason why that combination does so well is because during during the high season, whenever that is, because high season can mean different things in different markets. Whenever the high season is, the city or the area becomes the attraction, and during the slow season, the unique property becomes the attraction, where like say like in the winter months, my cabins, people like to stay in a cabin in the winter, right? So that's how I choose a market. Is I love scenic markets. You can't take the mountains away, you can't take the scenery away, right? No matter what happens to the economy, in whatever economy, like my very first company I ever started, my management company, is called Recession Proof Property Partners. And it's like this business model was built with the assumption that we were already in a recession. We weren't, but that's sort of been recession proof. That model is like unique properties with like scenic markets.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
And then in terms of floor plans, how big? Like, what's the? I mean, you mentioned 800 to 900 feet. Is it mainly just like a couple of bedrooms or maximum number of bedrooms so you can get more people in there sleeping, and then just a kind of a nice common area for cooking? And like, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to, yeah.
Yeah, so that 900 square foot, I mean, we built it as a long-term rental. Like we built it as if someone could live there long
I see.
term. And we do that just because there's built-in exit just in case we ever need to sell
Yes.
for any reason. But yeah, I like to stick to the 4 to 6 people. We do have properties that can sleep 14, but those were properties we didn't build. We just purchased those and it came with land that we're building on.
Okay.
What I've realized with some of the bigger properties is that people usually don't like, so this, take for instance the 14 person cabin. People don't take last minute trips or won't book last minute trips for 14 people, right?
Right.
But for a 2 to 6 person, 4 to 6 person 900,000 square foot property, and people will book the like trips like that all day. Like maybe 3 days from now someone will book a trip for like a couple days down the road.
Yeah.
So I like to stick within that, like the 1,000 to 12, anywhere like 1,200 square foot and under.
Mhm.
um 2 bedrooms is usually like the sweet spot. So I like our 900 square foot has a bedroom on the main floor, and then it has a loft that you can get to with a ladder.
Okay.
And then you have like I like to go with like pretty open floor plans. So like the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen are all one big room.
Yeah.
But they have full kitchens, like full kitchens, and then if I can fit it, a queen sleeper sofa, which can sleep an extra 2 people. So it's 2 bedrooms plus the sleeper sofa, 6.
I got you. Okay. Okay. Perfect. And one of the fears I have is around management, right? Like, how much time is this going to take? And because I was even thinking about it, like if I was thinking about actually, okay, I could let this lady do the arbitrage, or does it make sense for me to try to handle this myself? So what's your, and because you mentioned that was it your first company that was actually a management company, or?
Yeah, so we went I mean it just came out of necessity because it was just
Okay.
the properties I had built like myself without any partners.
Right.
But yeah, we development company into a management. That, I mean, that's what I offer my partners as well, is like I take over most of the management if the properties are in my market. Um but yeah, I mean, to answer that question in terms of the management piece, technology plays a huge part of it, is automating as much as you can. And you'll be surprised of how many companies there are out there that are in this space, whether it be automated messaging, whether it be automatic reviews. Because like I at this point, I'd say 70 to 80% of my messaging is handled automatically just through like a property management software that's
Yeah.
very relatively cheap.
Okay.
And then my cleaning is automated as well, because like I don't do any of my cleaning in house. It's through a third party company that's local.
Yeah.
And all of the calendars are synced for the most part. And what I realized is when you're first starting out, I would say probably 10 properties and under, you don't necessarily need a boots on the ground manager. And the reason being is because your cleaning company is the boots on the ground. Your cleaning company is going through that property anywhere between 1 to 4 times a week, or
Right.
1 to 3 times a week. They're going to be telling you what's wrong with the property. If something is wrong with the property, they can send you pictures if something is broken, or if a guest decided to, this has never happened to me, but if a guest decided to put a hole in the wall or something, like
Right.
they're going to tell you. Like one of our properties has like a gravel road leading up. Sometimes depending on how much rain we get or how aggressive the guest is with driving up and down, the cleaning company tells me if the road needs to be redone or something like that. So and then when it comes to the rest of the messaging, you can hire virtual assistants to, like, there's a whole subgroup of virtual assistants that you can hire for relatively cheap. That like I'm talking about like like based out of the Philippines. There's huge companies that like these people that we scout and find and hire, they're prior Marriott and Airbnb employees.
No
Like,
kidding.
so we just pay them a little bit more, and they're comfortable with working, say, like with an independent company outside of Airbnb. But the virtual assistant thing has been key outside of the automation as well. So and then on top of that, you have like a maintenance person. I recommend starting like very part-time.
Hmm.
Maybe you have them on a retainer or something of like maybe three to $400 a month, and then you just pay them hourly for any time they go out like to a property. But that's sort of the three big pieces is you have the automated messaging, the cleaning company, the maintenance person, and the virtual assistant. And the virtual assistant acts as your virtual front desk. Because again, like I'm not a huge fan of having boots on the ground if I don't need to. Now, if when we get to like 50 properties in a market, that changes. Like you need someone to actually be inspecting the cleaning company and doing all that fun stuff. But for the last what 4.5 years of managing properties and developing them for six, I don't have a boots on the ground manager right now. It's just that like one of our properties has 250 reviews. It was at like 4.9 stars. Like we haven't had a need for a boots on the ground manager.
Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, when I hear this, I think to myself, like I've got an apartment building in Edmonton, and I don't know if my new property manager, they've really kind of stepped it up. But
Oh
I
yeah.
tell you, it has been such a struggle, to find, and this is only 21 units, right? So I started thinking short-term rentals might be more challenging, but it sounds like if you put in the right systems and people and you can automate a lot of it. So you really don't need to, yeah, go ahead. You're going to say something.
Especially the check-in piece. That's one thing I forgot
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
mention was
yeah. I was
like
going to ask about that part. Yeah.
e-locks and automated like the there are systems and companies out there. One of them is called Remote Lock that syncs up with your electronic lock, and it can create codes for guests and automatically send them to guests. Like I'm a huge fan of like before even finding someone to take over work for me,
Yeah.
like find a system that can automate it for you before you put up like hire a person for it. But to the hotel thing, I've talked to a couple people who have done the conversion from multifamily apartments into say essentially boutique hotels is what I look at it as.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times you can skirt short-term rental laws in the area by getting a hotel permit for something like that.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
was actually going to ask you on, I was going to talk about zoning, but more importantly, I was going to ask about financing, right? Because that's my specialty. Now I know US and Canada, there's certainly some variations, but generally speaking, when you're doing these projects to develop and you're like, how do lenders, I guess, look at it? Are you getting good conventional loans, or is it a little bit less loan to value because this is more risky in their minds?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what does that business model look like so that the banks feel comfortable lending?
So 5 years ago, completely different story. I mean, I think COVID definitely accelerated the short-term rental world, especially in the rural markets. Like I would like if your properties were outside of the city, that like my properties were booked out pretty much. I mean, I kept raising my prices, but it was like 95% occupancy, like consistently throughout COVID. But 5 years ago, it was difficult. Now that there are companies that, again, I don't know if they'll do it in Canada, but like um, local credit unions, especially if
Mhm.
you are in a sort of a short-term rental area, local credit unions will take on even development projects. I mean, my local credit union took over $1 million project that we just did. But there are lenders out there that are specific to short-term rentals. And then on top of that, like we're developing 6 cabins where we got an SBA financing
Oh,
in the
interesting.
United States, and that was development one-time close. That was 85% loan to cost. And most of the lenders are pretty comfortable outside of SBA. Most of the lenders are pretty comfortable doing 70 to 75% loan to value, especially. And here's a little bit of a cheat code for people who are listening. I would recommend instead of going if you're just starting, and I talk about this in the course, and we can talk about that later. But if you're looking instead of starting from ground up development, potentially finding a property that has already been rented as a short-term rental,
Mhm.
purchasing that, and then if there's like an acre or two attached to it, then building more properties on that. A lender will like that more because there's already some sort of buffer built in there
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
like there's some
Some
sort
sort
of
of
history.
income.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you're buying the land, because I know that there's always like when I do developments, there's the land component, and then generally, to get your development permit and then your building permit, there's time that elapses, right? So frequently when I've done either industrial, retail, even multifamily, like I will buy the land outright, and
Yes.
then that becomes the equity into the deal,
Yes.
and usually, so is that similar
Same
or
thing.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
same exact thing. And I actually, this is the first time I've ever talked about that piece, because yeah, that I've tried doing it and I've done it in the past, and I'm sure you have, with trying to tie the land in with the loan, and it is a huge headache to do
Yeah,
that because there are so many moving pieces that especially with like there's so many moving pieces and timing and things that have to get done before another thing could get done with land development, that I always recommend purchasing the land first and then using that as the equity. And then if there's any other money that needs to be raised outside of that, obviously the investors know and stuff. But I mean, most of the principles I applied to short-term rentals were just learned from either multifamily books or any type of like multifamily content. Um, because at the end of the day, it's just financing and real estate. It's just a different form
yeah,
of
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah. What would be, so let's say you're doing, so I'll ask the question and then so I look at my land purchases usually on a, like what is my land per unit, right? So when I'm doing townhouses in suburban, it might be 30 to $50,000 per unit. What would the metrics be that you'd be looking for land cost per cabin as an example, right? Just so I have some, I'm just trying to relate it to my own experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be it's going to be different in every market, but
Yeah.
it's just based off of how much you're paying per acre. So whatever an acre goes for in your area, and you can find that out through a local real estate agent. And then from there, we're figuring out. I mean, it's just the same. It's the same thing with every development. Yeah, it's price per acre per cabin. And then on top of that, it's just like meeting our LTV requirements on like just what the overall cost is going to be turnkey, because you got to account for like furnishings and everything. So,
Sure.
um, I mean, again, I don't know how it works in Canada, but I mean, a pretty good metric to go off of is just purchasing at tax value. If you can find land at tax value, that, I mean, that property is going to be worth at least tax value, where
Mhm.
you're not like, that takes a lot of the guessing out of it. Um,
How about
but
this?
again, like you can do some pretty cool like forced appreciation things just with land alone. Like
Mm,
if you obviously you're putting in infrastructure, if you get permits and do some sort of land play, if there's potential for mountain views, you can clear up that land and essentially force appreciate that property just by clearing up the land to
sure.
open up a view. So there's different creative things you can do just specifically with land that doesn't play into like the price per acre, essentially, or price per cabin, like per acre.
Okay, well, how about this? So when you did the 6 cabins or 6 to
Yeah.
12, how many acres are you looking for?
Yeah, that was 15 acres. It was more like a number we were it was more a number we were looking for over how many acres it was. So I knew how much our down payment needed to be.
Mhm.
And I sort of just went off of that. I was like, okay, my down payment is here are going to be my soft costs, here are going to be my holding costs. This is what I'm raising from the investor, and this is what the land has to be. So it was more like a number on my
You
down
work
payment.
backwards to get to what your land
Yes.
cost could be.
Yeah, yeah. So I told my agent my land cost cannot be more than this. And so that I was looking for anywhere but like minimum of 5 acres plus. And
Gotcha.
we came across the 15 acres. So it's going to be really cool with that project because like I've already told the investor whatever equity we create in that property, I'm if he's comfortable with it, just pull it out and just build 4 more
More.
cabins because there's
Yeah.
way more than enough room to build more cabins on the 15 acres.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's how I came to that number, was just figuring out what my down payment, my soft costs, and everything else needed to be,
Right.
and then just going backwards.
So do you structure your deals like LPGPs, or are they joint ventures in the sense that you're
They're
just going
joint
to put what's
venture,
in
they're
there just
joint ventures, and I have partnered up with 3 short-term rental funds that
Mm.
have been established just this year alone, because they're starting to become more popular. People are making the transition from multifamily, because I mean multifamily uh, uh, like rates are so the cap rates are so compressed right now,
Yeah.
because there's so many people coming into the field that people are making that transition from multifamily to short-term, like these bigger short-term rental projects. So yeah, JVs initially, with like my first 4 big projects, it was JVs.
Yeah.
And I'm still open to doing JVs, but I sort of stepped away from raising capital a little bit and just letting the fund managers take care of that, where I own a piece of the general partnership and then they handle the LP piece.
Interesting. Can you, I mean, if it's confidential, I just wouldn't mind knowing what that might look like in terms of a structure, because I'm the way I do all my deals, I'll just be like, I talk about it on my show. I do LPGPs, usually an 8% pref. It kind of depends, right? But on development, there's generally a perceived higher risk. So I usually give a higher pref. And then whatever the splits might be, right? Whether it's 65-35, 70-30, 80-20, like they vary and whatnot. But and there might be a couple of people on the GP side with me, right?
Right.
Um,
Loan guarantors, if there's
that's right.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you bring in a fund and then they're kind of handling the capital raising, are you guys shoulder to shoulder as GPs, or how does that work? And then we don't have to get into all the fees and whatnot. I'm just trying to think of like the framework, because it allows you to just operate and do what it is that you're best at, which is finding properties, which I
Yeah,
love.
and I mean that should be the goal, is like going to the JV side. Like my JVs understand, like they are my passive partners. I don't need a second opinion. I'll ask for it. But like my job, the value that I'm bringing to this joint venture is the short-term rental piece.
Yeah.
I just want my JVs to be passive.
Yeah.
Because like for the most part, I don't take on short-term rental partners, like people who have operated short-term rentals in the past and stuff. So that's the same thing with the funds, is like I just want the funds to let me do my own thing.
Yeah.
Obviously they're gonna know a huge piece. Like all the funds that I work with have done some sort of larger scale multifamily stuff. So obviously I'm going to be leaning on some, because again, the information's the same a lot of the times when it comes to financing and just overall real estate practices. So I'll be leaning on them for that. But what you said about like prefs and stuff, it's pretty similar. We have a certain cash on cash we try to get to investors, and then the splits are different for each project depending on, again, what the numbers are bringing in. If I'm managing the project compared to if I'm bringing on a different manager, if I'm bringing on a different manager, it's in a different market. If it's in my market or in Western North Carolina, say like within an hour and a half of me, I'm taking care of the management. So
I got
the
you.
management piece plays a part into how much equity I have in each one of these projects. It could be anywhere between 20 to 50%, again, depending on the deal of the general partnership.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, sorry, 15 to 20%. That's how much you would give up, or what does that mean? I guess just so I make sure I.
20 to 50% is how much I would have of the general partnership.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that varies based on how much of the management you're doing for
Yeah,
this.
how much of the management I'm doing, and then just what the deal looks like. If
Yeah.
the deal, if we're able to get our investors their 15 to 16% cash on cash, or even if they want to do a pref, or like whatever the pref looks like, if we can get it to them faster or quicker, like if it's throwing off a certain amount of money,
Mhm.
then my split actually goes up a little bit on the back end. And it's just every deal is different.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
There,
I get that.
I've tried to do a cookie cutter thing, but every deal is so different.
Yeah. No, and that's same thing, right? Like, I mean, and I was going to ask you that. Is each deal by deal in terms of like, this is a buy and hold, or we're gonna like buy and maybe sell this in a, like, not flip it, but you know what I mean, like a shorter duration, or are you trying to
That's
create
that's
something?
one of my investing criteria, and I'm actually happy that you asked me that. No, they're all of them are buy and holds. I'm not a fan of putting 2 years
Okay.
into a project, 18 months into a project, and then selling it. It's like you can do a cash out refinance and pull out most of that equity if you
Sure.
want it. Um, so like I tell my investors a minimum of 10 years, 8 years, depending on what the market looks like.
I got you.
But
Okay.
no, they're long-term holds. It's like set it and forget it. Like I'll send you your check every quarter or every month, and then yeah.
Nice. And what, I mean, this is something that because I even like I was reading up a little bit on you before we started this. What kind of returns, and none of this is investing advice, this is just basically Shane and Alex having a conversation. So, but I'm sure that your investors come in with some ideas on what kind of returns they're looking for, right? Like you mentioned 15 or 16%,
Yeah.
but like what kind of returns could someone expect? Because I really have no context for short-term rentals.
Yeah, man. So if you're doing it on your own, like
Yeah.
if you're bringing up your own money, you're handling the development piece. So we'll start on the little piece and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
get to the
sure.
bigger
Yeah, yeah.
stuff
Perfect.
because I love giving this example. So my first cabin, again, these numbers were done prior to COVID, like the development costs were prior to COVID.
Yeah.
I had done a second home loan, a second home construction loan, here in the United States, and I think my it was a 20% down payment, and then my furnishing cost was like 17 or 18,000.
Okay.
Holding costs, I forgot how much the holding costs were, maybe another 10,000. But after the first year of renting that A-frame out, and I love giving the first one as an example, that one threw off and it continues to throw off. I mean, it's an infinite return if you get over 100, but it's like if you look at it over the first year, it was like 110% cash on cash. It was absolutely ridiculous how much that like I got of the
So
first
all your
one.
money in, you got it all back out, plus some in
And
year
then some
one,
that first year.
and then it just keeps on kicking out.
And it's an infinite return at that point. So that's if you're doing it on your own. If I had to guess now after COVID, it's probably anywhere between 60 to 80% cash on cash. Again, you have to be applying the right principles of building unique and scenic markets and all that fun stuff. But if you're doing it on your own, I mean, it's going to take a couple of years, but it's going to be like a 50 to 60%, 60 to 70% return cash on cash if you're just doing it on your own.
Yeah.
When I'm bringing on my investors in the JV deals, I'm predicting anywhere between, and I mean, I'm a little bit more generous on that side because they're also helping me guarantee the loan a lot of the times.
Okay.
But they're bringing, I mean, their cash on cash just to them is probably in the 20s, like low to mid 20s cash on cash. So they're essentially getting their money back in 4 years outside of any type of cash out refinance or sale or anything. So their equity multiple can be at the end of the at the end of the 10 years can be potentially like 4x, which is crazy. Again, they're taking a big part of the risk. That's why I'm a little bit more generous on that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when we're talking about the funds, their goal is anywhere between 15 to 16% cash on cash. And
Hmm.
that's a complete passive.
Well, I can see why people talk about this so often because these
I mean, just
returns
on the
are
rental arbitrage model, man, like that, there's a lot of, that's how I started like 6 years ago. That's how I raised like when I to save my money up. That's how I started. There's so much different money that could be done in so many different things. It's honestly just like the constraints your imagination because like more and more people are getting drawn to these like unique type of properties.
okay. So this is one of the things, and so I want to ask you about risks, and I want to set this up a little bit in terms of one of my fears is because um, you were early to the game, relatively early, right? And so one of my uh, thoughts is I don't like to be the last into something. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't want to be chasing and trying to figure this out when the um, when supply outstrips demand, right? When the number of people doing short-term rentals is growing and the demand is not there. So I'm curious, like, is that a legitimate risk, or what's your thoughts on that? And then secondly, what are the real risks that you see in not in getting into short-term rentals?
Yeah. So the big thing, and we already touched on it a little bit, is the zoning. So making sure that you are properly zoned. A lot of times if your city is going to change the short-term rental laws, I haven't heard of a city that, no, I take that back. I have, but a lot of times they will grandfather you in if you were like already like did it right and then got rid of short-term rentals. So I mean, you can't control zoning. The way we, I guess, pad against that is just like you think of exit in mind is the first thing that we think about. It's like, what are our options to exit if for some reason this doesn't end up working out? So that's number one. Number two is just when it comes to the supply piece, it's like I don't really look at it as I'm competing with other people who are doing short-term rentals. I'm more like you're competing with the hotels. So even if you're doing a larger scale, say if you're converting some sort of say like 21 units into short-term rentals, you don't really have too much flexibility when it comes to what the property looks like on the outside, but
Mhm.
what you can do on the inside is do some sort of interior design piece where it's like that's how you're bringing the uniqueness to the property, where you're theming it in some way, whether it be like themed towards families, themed towards kids. I've seen a lot of really cool stuff I've seen is like people bringing in local artists and painting murals on the walls. That can be done for relatively cheap. But when it comes to the demand piece, I think you're competing against hotels that like a boring hotel that people are just looking to book to just stay, and there isn't really anything unique to it. So if you can price your properties similar to that, but there's some sort of unique aspect to it, I think there's a long-term play for. I'm not like for a long time. It's like I'm not going to get into a business that I don't think is going to be there 10, 20, 30
Sure.
years. Short-term rentals have been around forever. It's just the
Yeah.
way that people book them is different now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm seeing that, and that's why it's more and more interesting to me, and I'm happy that we're kind of having this conversation
Yeah,
because
absolutely, man.
it's opening my mind in terms of like the opportunities. Like, is there a sweet spot on a per night basis in terms of like, you talked about kind of two beds and then like the queen pull out, but like what did people do they compare it to hotels? Do they say, our budget is between two and 400? Like, how do you kind of evaluate and make those
Yeah,
kind of
I like to do a minimum of 2 rooms. We do have some properties that are like mother-in-law suites to the main property
Yeah.
that are can sleep 4 people that are just 1 bedroom.
Right.
Um, I'd say I don't like doing any properties that can sleep a minimum of 2, because then you are competing with hotels, and in some cases
Oh,
potentially 4 as well. You're competing with hotels. So I like to stick to the 4 to 6
right.
is what, like 2 bedrooms or at least a bedroom with a pull-out couch. Um, so yeah, that's where I like to stick to when it
Okay.
comes to that. Just going through all the other properties that for the most part, that's what we build at.
Okay. Perfect. Um, I mean, I feel like I peppered you with so many questions.
Oh, keep hitting me, man. It's fine.
Um, like someone new getting into this, what are the things that you would say, Shane, before you get into this, here are one, two, or three things that you really need to know? I mean, we touched on zoning. I mean, we've talked about some of the high level things, but I'm just kind of curious, like if your best friend or your brother or sister or someone was coming to you, like what are the things you would say, like, look, before you do this, here are some of the things that I would really want you to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. So we already talked. So there's 3 things. We already talked about one of them, which is some sort of uniqueness factor of the
Yeah.
property.
Yeah.
Second thing is you want to, and this is covered extensively in the course, but you want to be thinking about the, you want to think about the whole guest experience. And when I say the whole guest experience, I mean, before they even check into your property, what does the drive look like to the property? That's a
Oh,
big thing, especially if you're in rural markets, mountain markets, wooded markets. You don't want your guests to be going down 30 minutes down a gravel road. A lot of times they're new to the area. Sometimes they're coming in at night. You don't want them to be pissed the second they walk into your property. So that's one thing, is that before I even go look at a piece of land, I pull it up on, I mean, you can pull satellite images relatively easy for
yeah.
free. I look at what the road leading up to the property looks like. If we have to put in a gravel road, yeah, that's great, but I like to be off of like a double laned, state maintained, city maintained road. Um, that way they're not, again, going up 30. I mean, every person that I tell that to, they have their own horror story of, yeah, I rented out this Airbnb, I rented out this cabin from my wife, my girl, or whoever, and we ended up going 20, 30 minutes down a blah, blah, blah. So that's access that would be the second thing, is access. So first thing, uniqueness, second thing is access.
Yeah.
And then third thing, I like to say this, and it's not necessarily a tip, it's just more like people who it's like, okay, this isn't going to work in my market. I'm pretty confident to say that if you're just building 1 or 2 properties, I feel like a unique property, 1 or 2 properties would do well in any market. And if land costs are too expensive in your area, or say if you live in if you're just thinking about like downtown or downtown and anywhere, I like to tell people who I coach, think of think of a place that people in your area like to vacation on the weekend. Where
Mhm.
do people in your area like to go to that's maybe anywhere between 30 minutes to 2 hours away? If you look at like here in the States, if you look at like upstate New York, people will drive 4 hours north from New York City to stay in a weekend in a cabin up in upstate New York. So that's the same thing. It's like, where do people like to vacation on the weekend in your market?
Yeah.
And if you can't think of an area, it's probably your market anyways. Like I live in the market that I operate in. But that's for people like, okay, like it's like if it's too expensive to build in your area, think of the vacation areas that people like to go to that are anywhere between. When you're first starting, I would maybe stick under an hour because you're going to be going up there a lot.
Yeah.
But anywhere between 30 minutes to 2 hours away.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because I was mountain biking not long ago with my brother-in-law, and I said, this would be a friggin' awesome place to do some sort of short-term rental. And he's the developer, and so he was actually, he liked the idea. And so we may now, based on this.
It's one of those things, you build one or two properties, that's essentially your market test.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't do well, you can just, I mean, again, your exit's built in, you can just sell it as a normal house. It's just for someone to live in or whatever. Or just someone who wants to take it over as a short-term rental. So like if it doesn't meet your expectations, you can obviously change a couple things, but if it ultimately doesn't work out, you just sell it.
And I'm just looking at your one website, and we'll certainly talk about the other one. So the Sargon Investments is your kind of existing website, and I'm looking at this beautiful looking A-frame. Was that prefab or was that like stick built on site?
The black one?
Yeah.
That's my first one. That's the one I've been talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was stick built. We almost did prefab, but at the time, shipping was so expensive, and it still is.
Yeah.
That I mean, shipping was like 11 grand to get us everything. Like, granted, it was pre-cut, pre-drilled, essentially a Lego set is what I looked at it as.
Yeah.
But we decided to stick build that one, just because of some of the constraints of actually, the way the road winds up to that property.
Sure.
I don't think we could have gotten like a big truck up that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This has
It's
been
still paved though. I didn't go back on what I just said. The road is still paved leading up to that property. And that one, again, that one's like my crown jewel almost. And we've rebuilt, or we are rebuilding that floor plan a couple times just because of how well it's done.
Well, like, I mean, if you go to the website, I mean, if you're listening on the podcast, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, like just look at it. It just looks like a beautiful, it's not big, but it just looks really nice. And what I love, because my neighbor has it here right beside me in Calgary, is these lights. Like, it's such a small little touch, but it really kind of, I don't know, it just seems very inviting. I mean, I'm sure you intentionally chose kind of like a dusk, photo. And so
Yeah.
it's,
And that's that the lights on the outside of that is like $100 thing, maybe paying another $100 for someone to put them up. But that's the cover photo. That's what sells it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really cool. So Alex, I believe that you've got a course coming out, and you're going to be kind of showing people, like, I mean, obviously we can only do so much in 45 minutes, right? Like, I tried to, get as much out of Alex in this time, but the reality is you can't master something listening to a podcast for 30 or 45 minutes. So tell me a little bit about the course, what it is that you're going to be covering, and just the rollout of it, if you will, because personally, I'm kind of interested now.
You would ask me the question of like, if a friend was coming to you and asking you how to do it, that's essentially the course I created. I created the course that I wish I would have had 6 years ago when I started. I mean, like, like in development, mistakes mean money. It's really that simple. Like, it's you don't know what you don't know when you're starting in development. Oh, this permit, I didn't know just submitting the permit cost $10,000. I'm talking about like on a larger project, right? So I created the course that I wish I had when I first started. And I think it's over 100. It took me 6 months to put together. It's like over 120 videos. There are templates, resources. There's a small management course that's in it as well. It doesn't go too heavy into management, but obviously, like, I'm a short-term rental manager as well. So there's a small management piece. There's, again, messaging templates. There are templates on how to reach out to GCs, how to put your team together, who needs to be on your team, who doesn't need to be on your team. Just what we talked about in this 45 minutes is just the first section, and there's 8 sections in this course. And it's funny because I'll actually use I'm actually been using the course as like reference material for myself if I forget to do something or something. But yeah, that's essentially the course. It's going to be on my website, which is alexjarbo.com, and I'm sure it's going to be in the show notes somewhere. But yeah, that's essentially the course. I've given it to some of my friends who have asked me about it, and I mean, they've given me feedback on it too. But I created the course I wish I had, and then just a course that I can send to people if they start asking me questions or something.
You know, you mentioned something, and I'm curious if this is something you experienced when you built the course. But so when I started kind of helping people get into commercial real estate and coaching and kind of put a course together myself, what I realized is I learned as much from doing that process, because there's a
Oh
lot
my
of
gosh.
things
Yeah.
that we take for granted. And sometimes it's important to go back and learn those principles again. And like, if, you know, I have made mistakes, and it's like, oh, I made a mistake because I probably didn't follow my own rules. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's
And it's you don't realize how much you don't realize how much you've learned, say going through just one development or whatever, until you actually, okay, like let's start from the foundation, let's start from ground level and see what the process is. And no, it's definitely like you start writing out a course, or you start putting together something like that, and you're like, okay, that doesn't make any sense, or that's something that I'm not even following right now that I'm
right.
teaching people. So yeah, it's like a good reminder. I was telling my wife, I was editing one of the videos one day, like maybe a couple months ago, and I was just zoned out. And I was just watching the video. I just started like agreeing with my own content, like just nodding my head. I was like, no, what are you doing? Like,
Well, this has been great, Alex. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've got 4 pages of notes, some takeaways. I definitely want to check out your course. The website is going to go live, you said, on what, halfway through September?
yeah, September 15th. It's going to be alexjarbo.com, and then alexjarbo.com is just going to be like everything I'm working on, including
Sure.
the website, the other website we talked about.
Yeah.
But the course will be one of the tabs. There'll be like 3 tabs, and they can just click,
Perfect.
go through the little webinar thing that's set up, and then they can just purchase at the end.
Wonderful. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that I should have asked you, or did we cover
No,
it?
I mean we talked from ground level to pretty high level stuff. Yeah, anywhere between that course is set up for anywhere you can literally plug and play. Like you can do 50 units and a multifamily to conversion if you wanted to, or I mean, you can start from literally a half-acre parcel and just build one property. So I've tried to get, and then there's also a capital raising piece to the course as well if you want to bring on partners and stuff. No, we covered everything, man.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, Alex. Appreciate it. And we will certainly stay in touch, and I'll keep you posted on how things work out on some of these opportunities that I'm kind of exploring right now. So,
Appreciate it, Shane.
okay. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, man.